How many times have you recited Psalm 23? You've memorized it, whispered it in the dead of night, seen it on walls, and heard it in moments of profound pain. The Lord is my shepherd. These words are familiar, comforting even. But what if everything you thought you knew about this iconic psalm was wrong? What if it's not a gentle lullaby, but a fierce battle cry? A roadmap not just for solace, but for survival? Prepare to have your understanding shattered and rebuilt. This isn't the Psalm 23 you learned in Sunday school. David didn't pen these verses from the gilded halls of a palace. He wrote them from the dust, the danger, and the raw, blood-soaked reality of his life as a shepherd. He knew what it meant to fight off wolves with a sling and unwavering faith, to navigate treacherous valleys where death lurked in every shadow. Every word of Psalm 23 bleeds with the urgency of his own survival story. This is not poetry, it is a testimony etched in hardship. Centuries later, Jesus, the Good Shepherd himself, would not just echo these words, but embody them with his very life. Suddenly, Psalm 23 wasn't just David's story, it became ours. Perhaps you're here because a part of you is tired, questioning, quietly desperate. You're ready to hear these words again, not with weary ears, but with fresh eyes and a heart hungering for a shepherd, not just looking for one. In this video, we're going to dismantle Psalm 23, verse by verse, line by line, revealing truths both ancient and urgently relevant to your life today. We'll uncover how this psalm doesn't just mirror your struggles, but prophetically points to Jesus in ways most people have never noticed. And if you stay with me until the end, I'll reveal how David's seemingly simple words carry a pattern of divine pursuit, a blueprint for navigating pain, finding restoration, and understanding God's relentless love through every season of your life. But first, we must strip away the comfortable familiarity. We must approach this psalm not with the calm voice of tradition, but with the burning hunger of someone standing in the valley, desperately searching for hope. Because here's the shocking truth most people miss: Psalm 23 is not a funeral dirge. It is a warrior's declaration. David, before he was king, was a shepherd. Before he led men, he led sheep. He fought in the dark, slept with one eye open, and walked valleys no one else dared to tread. When he declared, "The Lord is my shepherd," he wasn't being poetic, he was making a statement of absolute survival. So, if you've ever walked through the deepest shadows, if you've ever wondered if God is truly with you in the crushing silence, then this psalm is for you. Let's begin at the beginning, but this time, with eyes wide open. The Lord is my shepherd. This opening line is so ingrained, so familiar, that we often miss its earth-shattering weight. David wasn't crafting a metaphor, he was declaring a profound reality born from his deepest lived experience. He didn't learn shepherding from ancient scrolls, he lived it in the wild, untamed fields. He battled lions and wrestled bears. He endured harsh nights in caves and navigated treacherous terrain to protect sheep utterly oblivious to the dangers surrounding them. When David calls the Lord his shepherd, he isn't being religious, he's being real. The original Hebrew here screams with power, "Yahweh is my shepherd." Not a shepherd, not a distant, benevolent figure, but mine. It's a declaration of covenant loyalty, a defiant shout that the same God who orchestrates galaxies is the one guiding his every step, fighting his unseen battles, and protecting him even when he can't perceive the threat. And here's the astonishing twist: David wasn't just identifying with the sheep, he was prophetically foreshadowing the shepherd who was to come. Centuries later, Jesus would declare in John 10 verse 11, "I am the good shepherd." The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Do you see the seismic connection? David wielded a rod to defend his flock, Jesus became the rod, struck for our iniquities. David risked his life for lambs, Jesus gave his life for souls. David was Israel's shepherd king, but Jesus is the shepherd king of eternity. This radical opening line forces us to confront a vital question: who is really leading your life? Not in theory, not on Sundays, but in the gritty, daily moments, in the decisions you make, in the fears that grip you at 2 a.m., who holds the staff? We all follow something: a career, a relationship, a habit, a fear. But only one shepherd lays down his life to lead you out of the wilderness. David wasn't boasting when he said, "The Lord is my shepherd." He was surrendering. So, I ask you now, who or what are you depending on to lead your life today? Because the rest of this psalm means absolutely nothing if you don't know who's guiding your very next step. And in the very next line, David says something surprising, something we'll completely miss if we only expect comfort from the shepherd. He says, "I shall not want." But what if you still do? Let's keep going. He makes me lie down. At first glance, it sounds so peaceful, a gentle invitation to rest. But if you've ever tried to make a sheep lie down, you know it's anything but easy. Sheep are stubborn creatures, they don't rest on command. They only lie down when four crucial conditions are met: they must be freed from fear, free from tension with other sheep, free from hunger, and free from the torment of pests. In other words, rest doesn't come naturally to us, or to sheep. It must be made possible. So, when David writes in Psalm 23 verse 2, "He makes me lie down in green pastures," he's not describing a spa day. He's confessing a profound, often uncomfortable truth. Sometimes, God has to intervene, to abruptly interrupt your relentless momentum, because you simply won't stop on your own. We live in a world that worships exhaustion, that praises productivity as if it's the highest virtue. But your soul was not designed to run without rhythm, and God, your shepherd, knows that. So, when your pace becomes unsustainable, when your striving drowns out his gentle whisper, he does something most of us tragically mistake for punishment: he makes you lie down. Sometimes, it looks like a devastating disappointment. Other times, it manifests as soul-crushing burnout, a seemingly missed opportunity, a door slammed shut, a quiet season that feels like utter failure. But what if it's not? What if your exhaustion isn't a sign that you're broken, but that you are profoundly loved? You see, those green pastures don't always feel green at first. Often, they look like places you never chose, jobs you didn't expect to lose, health battles you never asked for. But underneath it all is a shepherd who knows what your soul needs more than you do. And when he says, "Lie down," he's not asking for mere compliance, he's inviting you to receive. Because the same God who powerfully leads you also knows precisely when to gently, or sometimes forcefully, slow you down. David didn't say, "He invites me to take a break." He said, "He makes me." Not because God is harsh, but because he is good. The shepherd doesn't wait until we completely collapse, he leads us to stillness before the collapse comes. So, here's the honest, gut-wrenching question: could your current burnout be a divine invitation to stillness? Could the slowdown you're vehemently resisting actually be the restoration you've been desperately praying for? The shepherd doesn't just offer you peace, he sometimes forces you to pause long enough to truly feel it. And as David continues, we see that stillness isn't the final destination. It's the essential preparation. Because next, the shepherd begins to lead again, and where he leads may utterly surprise you. Let's go there next. He leads me beside still waters. At first, this paints a picture of tranquil serenity, the kind of place you'd escape to clear your head. But remember, Psalm 23 isn't about vacation, it's about survival. And David, the warrior shepherd, wasn't describing a retreat, he was describing the discipline of peace. Still waters weren't just for drinking, they were sanctuaries for sheep. Rushing streams could easily sweep them away, and with their thick, heavy wool, even a slip into fast-moving water could mean instant death. So, the shepherd had to guide them with meticulous care, not just to water, but to water they could trust. And that, my friend, is the secret. Peace isn't merely the absence of noise, it's the profound presence of safety, trust, and divine order. And here's the uncomfortable truth we often refuse to admit: most of us don't know how to truly rest in still waters because we become addicted to drinking from the raging river of anxiety. We gulp down busyness, feast on worry, scroll through chaos, and sip stress like our morning coffee, calling it normal. But what if Jesus is offering something entirely different, something revolutionary? Do you remember the woman at the well in John chapter 4? She came for physical water, but Jesus offered her infinitely more. He declared, "Whoever drinks of the water that I will give him will never be thirsty again." She was desperately searching for temporary relief. He gave her an entirely new reality. That's precisely what the shepherd does. He doesn't just lead you away from danger, he leads you toward himself, toward a peace that isn't based on fleeting circumstances, but is deeply rooted in who he eternally is. Because true peace isn't a place you find, it's a person you encounter. It's not found in an empty calendar or a secluded cabin in the woods. It's found in the unwavering presence of the shepherd who knows exactly what your soul is craving. David had experienced both kinds of waters. He had wandered beside chaos, fled for his life, battled in caves, and wept in silence. But he also learned this profound truth: the Lord doesn't just calm the water, he calms the heart. So, perhaps what you need right now isn't a frantic change in your schedule, but a radical return to stillness, a stillness that isn't forced, but divinely led. A peace that flows not from perfect performance, but from his unshakable presence. And just when you might think that peace is the ultimate goal, David reveals something more. Because after stillness comes something utterly unexpected, a profound restoration. Let's explore what that truly means next. He restores my soul. It sounds so gentle, doesn't it? Like the soft brushing away of sorrow, or a whispered encouragement in the deepest dark. But when David penned these words in Psalm 23 verse 3, he wasn't talking about mere comfort, he was talking about rescue. In the original Hebrew, the word for restore is shav. It means to return, to bring back, to turn around. And this wasn't abstract theology for David, he knew intimately what it meant to fall and to be brought back from the brink. There's a haunting image in ancient shepherding, something only those who've tended actual sheep truly understand. It's called a cast sheep. A cast sheep is one that has fallen over onto its back and cannot get up on its own. Its legs flail helplessly, its breathing becomes shallow, and unless the shepherd finds it in time, it will slowly die that way, stuck, helpless, completely unaware of the immense danger it's in. And what does the compassionate shepherd do? He doesn't yell. He doesn't shame. He kneels. He gently turns the sheep over, massages its flailing legs, and waits patiently until it can stand again, until it can walk again, until it is utterly restored. That's the vivid picture David paints for us, and it's more than poetic, it's deeply personal. Because David had been a cast sheep. He had stood on a palace rooftop when he should have been leading his army in battle. He had taken what wasn't his, lied to cover it up, and ruthlessly murdered to hide his sin. And when the prophet Nathan courageously confronted him, David broke. But he didn't run from God. He returned. In Psalm 51, his raw confession, he cried out, "Restore to me the joy of your salvation." And God did. This is not the story of a perfect man, this is the awe-inspiring story of a fallen man restored by a faithful shepherd. So, let me ask you, have you ever felt too far gone, too utterly broken to be brought back, too hopelessly tangled in shame to be lifted up? The shepherd is not afraid of your fall. In fact, he specializes in it. He restores what religion writes off. He lifts what others leave behind. He doesn't discard the cast down, he rescues them. He restores them. And that's not the end of the story. Because once your soul has been lifted, it needs to be led. And David says something next that's easy to overlook, but it holds a profound truth that far too many miss. He leads me in paths of righteousness. We often mistakenly assume this means comfort, that when God is leading, the road will be smooth, the skies perpetually clear, and the journey effortlessly straight. But David, the battle-hardened shepherd, knew better. When he wrote Psalm 23 verse 3, he was not promising ease, he was proclaiming absolute, unwavering trust. In Hebrew, the phrase, paths of righteousness, means far more than mere morality. It speaks of right paths, paths that are both morally sound and strategically wise. These are the paths the shepherd meticulously chooses, not only because they are good, but because they are ultimately best, even when they are incredibly hard. And sometimes, they are gut-wrenchingly hard. Ask Joseph, who faithfully followed the dream God gave him, only to be betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, and then unjustly forgotten in a prison cell. Ask Moses, who courageously obeyed the call of God, only to spend 40 arduous years wandering with a rebellious, ungrateful people. Ask Jesus, who perfectly followed the will of the Father, all the way to the brutal cross. These were undeniably righteous paths, but they were anything but easy. And here's the stark truth, that mess you're currently in, that stretch of road that feels confusing, unfair, or utterly wrong, may not be evidence that you've taken a wrong turn. It may be profound proof that you are on the exact path God has chosen for your soul. But here's the key, the shepherd doesn't just send you down a road, he leads you. That means he is constantly ahead of you, clearing unseen obstacles, vigilantly watching for hidden dangers, and subtly guiding your steps, even when you don't fully realize you're being guided. And yes, sometimes it feels like he's completely silent. But silence is not absence. In fact, the shepherd's leadership is often clearest in hindsight, like a divine GPS recalculating your steps, not based on your failures, but based on his unwavering faithfulness. Have you ever missed a turn, only to find a new, unexpected road still waiting for you? That's not coincidence, that's grace. And maybe your perceived detour wasn't a detour at all. Maybe it was the right path, just not the easy one. Because righteousness isn't always lined with applause, sometimes it's lined with resistance, profound loneliness, or even deep sorrow. But it is still the way, and the shepherd still leads. But what happens when that path leads directly into shadow? What if the next step of righteousness takes you into the very place you fear most? Because David's next words don't describe a sun-drenched mountaintop. They describe a valley, and not just any valley, but the valley of deep darkness. Let's bravely walk there next, together. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. These are perhaps the most quoted words in Psalm 23, yet they are so often profoundly misunderstood. This isn't about the moment of dying, it's about living through darkness. David doesn't say, if I walk through the valley, he says, even though I walk, it's a certainty, not a mere possibility. Valleys are an undeniable part of the journey, even for the righteous, even when God is actively leading. In Hebrew, the phrase is Salma, the valley of deep darkness. It doesn't just mean physical death. It signifies shadowed places, hidden threats, the terrifying unknown, the moments when you can't see what's ahead, and the deafening silence of God feels like utter abandonment. But notice what David says next, I will fear no evil. Not because evil miraculously ceases to exist, but because, you are with me. That, my friend, is the seismic turning point in the entire psalm. Right here, the pronoun dramatically shifts. Before this, David was talking about God, now, he's talking to him. When life was green pastures and still waters, David declared, he leads me. He restores me. But in the valley, the language becomes intimately personal, you are with me. Because valleys have a brutal, beautiful way of stripping us down to what's truly real. No more religion, no more rote routine, just you and God in the suffocating dark. And that's when you discover a truth that sermons can't teach and comfort can't fake, the shepherd doesn't avoid the valley. He walks through it with you. Do you remember Gethsemane, when Jesus cried out in agony, sweating drops of blood? He, too, walked through the valley, not just beside us, but ahead of us. He descended into our darkest shadows so we would never have to walk them alone. And here's the hidden, profound hope in this verse, it's a shadow, which means there must be light nearby. Shadows only exist when light is present. The terrifying presence of that shadow may paralyze you with fear, but it is also irrefutable proof that the shepherd is near. So, if you're in that place today, the place of gnawing questions, chilling uncertainty, or paralyzing dread, you are not abandoned. You are profoundly accompanied. The valley is not your enemy, it's your classroom. It's where theology transforms into raw intimacy, where fear slowly, painfully, becomes unshakable faith. But the shepherd doesn't stop there. Because in the next line, David no longer speaks about walking. He talks about fighting. And the shepherd? He's not just gently guiding now, he's fiercely defending. Let's look at that. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. This is one of the most surprising and profound lines in Psalm 23 verse 4. Comfort from a rod. From a staff. These are not soft tools. They are instruments of action, of defense, discipline, and absolute authority. David would know, he had carried both. The rod was a weapon, a short, sturdy club used to strike predators, to guard the flock against imminent danger. And the staff, that long, crook-shaped tool, was used to guide, to pull sheep back from treacherous cliffs, to redirect the wayward ones who drifted. Together, they formed the shepherd's arsenal, not against the sheep, but for them. And David says they bring him comfort because when you truly know who your shepherd is, even his correction becomes a source of profound reassurance. You don't have to fear the valley when you know the one walking with you is armed and utterly willing to fight for you. This is where we confront one of the hardest, yet most liberating, truths of the Christian life. Sometimes, the very thing that feels like God's painful discipline is, in fact, his strategic protection. That crushing disappointment you didn't understand, that relationship that inexplicably fell apart, that closed door you begged him to open, what if the shepherd pulled you back with his staff because what lay ahead would have utterly destroyed you? David had experienced that mercy firsthand. He had been corrected, redirected, broken, and profoundly loved in the breaking. Because the shepherd doesn't correct out of anger, he corrects out of an unyielding, fierce attachment. And when he fights, he doesn't fight from a safe distance, he fights right there in the valley, in the mess, in the terrifying middle of your fear. So, the next time you feel that gentle, yet firm, pressure steering you back, or that painful pause that keeps you from running headlong into something potentially destructive, remember this: correction isn't rejection, it's redemption in disguise. And the rod is not your punishment. It is your protection. The shepherd doesn't swing it at you, he swings it for you. There's immense comfort in knowing your shepherd is not passive, not indifferent. He sees the danger long before you do, and he is utterly unafraid to act. So, if you've been wondering if the path got blurry and you felt his powerful pull, don't resist it. That's not him punishing you, that's him rescuing you. And after the battle, after the fierce defense, something truly unexpected happens. The shepherd doesn't just guard you from your enemies. He prepares a table right in front of them. And the meaning of that table might just change how you see victory forever. Let's go there next. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. This is one of the most radical, jaw-dropping images in all of Psalm 23 verse 5. Because if you were writing this psalm, wouldn't you expect the next line to be something like, "You destroy my enemies," or "You miraculously rescue me from their presence"? But that's not what David says. He declares that God sets a table, a feast, right there, in the middle of the battlefield, with your adversaries watching every single bite. This is not a picture of escape, it's a breathtaking picture of profound honor. The shepherd doesn't remove the snarling wolves. He doesn't silence the mocking critics or erase the relentless tormentors. Instead, he feeds you, lavishes you with provision, peace, and security, right in front of them. And your enemies? They are forced to watch. Because victory isn't always about elimination. Sometimes, it's about breathtaking elevation. Think of Joseph, utterly betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, unjustly imprisoned. But in Genesis 45, he stands as the powerful ruler over Egypt and says to them, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." His table was prepared in full view of those who once tried to bury him. Or Daniel, thrown into a den of ravenous lions for his unwavering faithfulness. But the very next morning, it was his accusers who were judged, while Daniel feasted on God's faithfulness. Or Jesus, who, knowing betrayal was imminent, still broke bread at a table with his enemies. And later, in plain sight of mocking crowds and cruel soldiers, he displayed a victory not of brute might, but of unfathomable mercy. That's the kind of table David is describing. A table set in the heart of the tension, not after the battle, but in it. And here's the part that might sting a little: sometimes, God doesn't remove your enemies because he wants to bless you in spite of them. Sometimes, the miracle isn't deliverance from the fire, it's dignity in the fire. Your enemies may surround you, but they do not seek you. God does. And maybe you've been praying for escape, when God is trying to give you profound endurance. Maybe you've been begging for him to take the pain away, when instead, he's preparing a glorious feast right there in it. So, let me ask you, what table has God set for you in a place you never expected? Because this psalm isn't just leading toward comfort. It's building toward unshakable confidence. And at the very center of that confidence comes something sacred. The shepherd anoints. And that next line. It's more than ceremonial, it's profoundly powerful. Let's discover why. You anoint my head with oil. In ancient times, anointing wasn't just symbolic, it was powerfully strategic. Shepherds would carefully pour oil over the heads of their sheep to protect them. Why? Because sheep are incredibly vulnerable, not just to ferocious predators, but to insidious pests. Tiny, tormenting flies would swarm around their heads, crawling into their ears and nostrils, laying eggs that would literally drive the sheep mad. The irritation could become so unbearable that some desperate sheep would violently beat their heads against rocks, just to find a moment of relief. So, what did the wise shepherd do? He generously covered their heads with oil. The oil became an impenetrable barrier, a healing balm, a potent weapon of mercy against what would have slowly, silently destroyed them from the inside out. And David declares, "You anoint my head." Not because he's royalty, though he was. Not because he's worthy, because he profoundly wasn't. But because the shepherd saw what was unseen, the attacks no one else noticed, the inner torments, the slow, silent erosion of the soul. And the shepherd responded, not with armor, but with oil. It's the same oil used to commission kings, the same oil used to consecrate priests, the same oil poured out in John 12 when Mary anointed the feet of Jesus just days before his crucifixion. Oil in Scripture always signifies something deeper: it's healing, it's calling, it's covering. And in David's life, this wasn't mere theory, it was a potent memory. As a teenage shepherd boy, he was summoned from the dusty fields, and the prophet Samuel poured oil over his head. 1 Samuel 16 verse 13 declares, "And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon David from that day forward." But what about you? What if the oil being poured over you in this tumultuous season isn't for ease, but for fierce endurance? What if the favor of God on your life doesn't look like applause, but like divine protection in the unseen, relentless battles? Because God's anointing is not for comfort, it's for assignment. It doesn't always make you feel powerful. Sometimes, it simply keeps you sane. It shields you when no one else sees the internal fight you're in. It reminds you that you are chosen, even when life feels utterly chaotic and overwhelming. So, let me tell you this: the shepherd never anoints you for no reason. If you feel the oil being poured over you, it means there's a battle, yes, but also a profound purpose. And just when it seems like the psalm has reached its emotional peak, David reveals something absolutely stunning. You're not just standing, you're being pursued. Let's explore that electrifying truth. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. Most of us read that line from Psalm 23 verse 6 as a soft, gentle conclusion, like a calm breeze after a raging storm. But that's not what David is saying at all. This is not passive poetry, it's a relentless pursuit. The Hebrew word for follow is radaf. It doesn't mean to trail politely behind, it means to pursue, to chase, to hunt down with fierce, unyielding intensity. And what is chasing you? Not judgment, not shame, not punishment, but goodness and mercy. That, my friend, changes absolutely everything. Because most of us live our lives as if we're being hunted by our past, haunted by our failures, tracked by anxiety. We run faster, work harder, exhaust ourselves trying to stay ahead of regret. But David radically flips the script. He's not running from something, he's being actively pursued by someone. And that someone is utterly relentless. This isn't mercy that passively waits for you to ask, this is mercy that relentlessly comes after you when you're not even looking for it, when you're wandering, when you're stubborn, when you're too ashamed to even come back. Think of Peter. After denying Jesus 3 times, he didn't return to the disciples in glory. He went back to fishing, back to what he knew, back to what felt safe. But in John chapter 21, Jesus shows up on the shoreline, not with a rebuke, but with breakfast. He doesn't lecture Peter, he restores him. He relentlessly chases him with mercy and sits him down at a fire to gently remind him, "You're still mine." That's the shepherd's heart. And his goodness? It's not just kindness, it's abundant provision. It's the steady, unwavering hand that writes breathtaking beauty into your most broken chapters. It's the grace that miraculously shows up when you least expect it and need it most. You may think you've outrun God, but the shepherd doesn't tire. He doesn't quit. He doesn't lose track. His mercy doesn't arrive late, it arrives precisely when your strength completely runs out. So, let me ask you, can you remember a time when God relentlessly chased you down? Not with punishment, but with an overwhelming, unconditional love. Not with shame, but with arms flung wide open. Because that's what David powerfully saw, a God who didn't just guide him in the light, but relentlessly pursued him in the darkest dark. And now, at the very end of this incredible journey, David lifts his eyes and sees the ultimate destination. It's not rest. It's not a throne. It's home. Let's finish this journey. I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. David concludes Psalm 23, not with triumph or vengeance, but with profound arrival, not at a battlefield, not in a grand palace, but at home. It's easy to overlook that final line, to hear it like a soothing hymn or a gentle closing prayer. But this is far more than a poetic finale. It's the glorious destination the entire psalm has been relentlessly leading toward. From lush green pastures to terrifying dark valleys, from anointing oil and tables spread before enemies, to relentless mercy chasing you down, every single moment was drawing David closer to one fundamental truth: you were made for communion, not just for survival. I will dwell, he proclaims. Not visit. Not pass through. Not drop in only on holy days. Dwell. This is the language of deep belonging, of divine permanence, of intimate presence. In David's time, the house of the Lord referred to the tabernacle, the sacred place where God's very presence dwelled among his people. For David, it was the ultimate longing, not just to know about God, but to live with him, to profoundly abide. And centuries later, Jesus would echo that same profound longing. In John 14, as he prepared to face the cross, Jesus told his disciples, "In my Father's house are many rooms. I go to prepare a place for you." The shepherd was going ahead to make sure his sheep had a permanent place to rest, not just in this life, but forever. And that's the magnificent promise hidden in David's final line. Eternal life doesn't start when you die, it starts when you dwell. When you stop treating God as a fleeting visitor and wholeheartedly welcome him as your home. When you stop frantically running from place to place, desperately hoping to find peace in your shifting circumstances, and finally realize that peace is a person, a shepherd who walks with you, prepares you, pursues you, and ultimately brings you home. That's the profound secret hidden in every single verse of this psalm. It begins with absolute trust, "The Lord is my shepherd." And it ends with the promise of eternal home, "I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." So, wherever you are on this journey, whether you're in green pastures or deep, terrifying valleys, whether you feel powerfully anointed or utterly abandoned, know this: you are not aimlessly wandering. You are being meticulously led. And the destination? It's not merely escape. It's not just relief. It's him, the shepherd who became the king. Let's reflect on that in our final moments together. From the very first, powerful words, "The Lord is my shepherd," to the final, glorious promise, "I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever," Psalm 23 has taken us on an unforgettable journey, not just through fields and valleys, but through the very heart of God Himself. This was never just a psalm about sheep. It was the powerful testimony of a shepherd who became a king. And it is the eternal echo of a greater shepherd who reigns as king forever. David's life profoundly mirrored the psalm he wrote. He was chosen in obscurity, anointed in the fields, relentlessly hunted in the wilderness, miraculously restored after devastating failure, and elevated in the presence of his enemies. And through it all, he was pursued, not by fame or earthly power, but by God's relentless goodness and mercy. And Jesus? He walked that exact same road. But where David fought with a rod and staff, Jesus fought with nails and thorns. Where David spoke of oil, Jesus was anointed for burial. Where David feared no evil, Jesus bravely faced evil head-on and utterly overcame it. He is the shepherd who became the lamb, and the lamb who now reigns as the eternal shepherd king. So if you've ever wondered whether Psalm 23 still speaks to your life today, it does. It speaks to the weary, you are not alone. It speaks to the wandering, you are being led. It speaks to the wounded, you are being restored. And it speaks to you, wherever you are, saying, you are not forgotten. Because this isn't just David's story. It's yours. The shepherd has walked every single path you're on, and his voice still lovingly calls your name. So now, if this psalm means more to you than it ever has before, share it with someone who desperately needs a shepherd. And in the comments below, tell me what verse from this psalm speaks to you the loudest today, because your story might be the encouragement someone else is waiting for. Let's keep walking. Let's keep trusting. And let's never, ever forget, the shepherd never left. He's just getting you home.